Welcome to Brain Wellness, the podcast. I'm your host, Mandy NP. Each episode will bring you a new topic or interview related to brain health and wellness as part of my mission to help you on the path to a healthier, happier brain. So, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. My guest today is Amy Thurman. Amy is a remarkable individual whose life journey is a testament to the power of hope, resilience, self-discovery, and transformation. Amy's story is one of overcoming unimaginable adversity, including a traumatic brain and neck injury that changed the course of her life. Her inspiring journey from the depths of despair to unwavering determination will leave you inspired and motivated. Her story is proof that no matter the challenges we face, we can find the hero within ourselves. As an inspirational speaker, author, podcast host, disabled entrepreneur, story development coach, and owner of Polish the Mirror, Amy empowers individuals to rewrite their narratives, uncovering their inner strengths. Welcome to the show, Amy.
Oh my goodness, Mandy, thank you so much for that amazing intro. I appreciate it so much. It's just really an honor for me to be here. Thank you.
Of course. I love reading the intros and kind of getting to know how people are and watching the responses as I brag about you for a little bit there. So I love people's backstories and figuring out kind of where they came from and how you got to where you are now. So let's kind of start right there. Share as much or as little of your story as you'd like, and we'll kind of go from there.
Okay, yeah, it's pretty extensive. It's been a 10-year journey, and so there's a lot to it. So I'll give you the short version, and we can kind of springboard from there. In 2014, I was working at a major university. I have 3 kids. I was taking them everywhere, doing the mom thing, running them all over the place. And I don't know if you know or have ever worked at a university, but you work a lot of hours. It's not like a typical job. And so I not only was I doing that, had my kids, I was also volunteering. And so I literally never sat still. I was always doing something, always on the go. And I went from that to literally the very next day, I could not even take myself to the restroom. So one night I felt sick and I got up to take some medicine and I ended up passing out and landed on my face on the hardwood floor. The impact from that sheared my brainstem, caused a traumatic brain injury, and it actually broke my neck. But it took my doctor 6 months to figure out my neck was broken. And so, for almost the first year after that, I had to lay flat in a bed for 23 hours a day with a cover over my eyes, earplugs in my ears, barely able to speak above a whisper. If you have had a brain injury, you understand this, that those are very, very delicate things, noises, sounds, the vibrations from talking. And so it was essentially like I was dead to my family because I went from doing everything to the very next day I couldn't even take myself to the restroom. And so you can imagine that it sent me into a deep, deep, dark place because not only did I feel like a burden to my family, but nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. And what that is what my book is about is my 10-year journey of pushing my way through all of these doctors, all of these medical professionals, trying to find someone who could figure out what was wrong with me. And, we can get into that a little bit later, but so basically, I have gone from being completely incapacitated for that time to fighting my way back to now I'm able to live an empowered life. And still, I can excuse me, I can still only hold my head up for a few hours at a time, and I have to rest a lot. But I have figured out how to make that work for me, and so that I can live an empowered life now, and I get to help others do the same.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a crazy response from falling and passing out. Just the odds of hitting things just perfectly in order to cause all that damage. Um, I
It
can imagine what it's like to have life and then the next day you don't, because I had the same kind of thing happen with my brain injury last year as well. And I feel every time I interview somebody that's had a brain injury, I feel like we're creating this new little circle of friends online here. But
exactly. One of my doctors said to me, had I that the because my head was turned, I landed on the left side of my face, and the doctor said, had my head been turned just, less than an inch further, that I would have landed on my nose and it would have shoved it up, that would have been the end. Like I would not have survived. And many of my doctors keep telling me it's just a miracle. It's a miracle that I'm
Mhm.
still alive, that I made it through that I'm able to walk. And, so there's a reason that I'm still here. But yes, I love talking to other people who have experienced brain injuries, because it's one of those things you don't know what it's like until you experience it yourself. You can't really explain it. There's just an understanding about it. So I'm so thankful to be here to be able to talk about it with you.
Yeah, you definitely have a purpose. So finding that purpose and using that purpose is definitely a good thing to do. Having been a neurology nurse practitioner, it's a different experience going from the provider to being the patient, because I thought I knew a lot. And then as I've been experiencing it from the patient side, I'm realizing that there's a lot that I didn't know about. So whenever I get to be back in that world again, I will be a better practitioner having this experience. Now, was it the way I wanted to learn? No, but as we share all these stories, we all have our differences in life. We all have our different experiences, but there are a lot of shared things that we see. And in 10 years, I can imagine that you've gone probably through some similar treatments that I've been through, and other people with brain injuries. But can you share some of those resources and different therapies that helped you get to where you are now?
Absolutely. It's fascinating to me. Some of the things that I experienced along the way, I experienced the typical, at the beginning, my very first neurologist, and let me say this too, that I'm on my sixth neurologist, because each of them played a role in helping me in some way, but in just inertly, or just inside myself, I knew that there was someone out there who knew what was really causing the problem, what the real problem was. And so I just kept pushing. And so I'm on my sixth neurologist, and he's the one I'm sticking with. But so at the very beginning, my first neurologist said, just stay in bed for a couple of weeks. And I think it was 5 weeks, actually. You can go back to work after 5 weeks. And that didn't happen. Um, but it was really, I kept, like I said, kept going through all of these neurologists trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And it was actually one of my physical therapists who said, this is not something physical therapists usually say, but I'm going to say it, that you need to check into naturopathic medicine. Like you need to check into a different arena, because I had tried all the typical things. And then he shared with me a speaker that he had heard from a brain center in Dallas. And he said, I think they can help you. And so I said, oh, okay. So I looked into it. Long story short, I was ended up becoming a patient there, self-funded, because insurance is
Yeah.
not going to cover that kind of thing. And the treatments they use there still blow my mind. I literally, I had no idea. I knew that they had this out of the box way of doing things, but one of the things that they did, because they're the ones who figured out that my brainstem was sheared. And so they were able to figure out exactly where the brainstem was sheared. And so the only way I know how to explain this is it looked like a huge 9-volt battery with these prongs on it. And they put this on my tongue. They had specific areas on my tongue, just held it there, and then on the outside of my cheek, and held it there, a couple times a day, each day for a couple of weeks. And they taught me that there are areas from your tongue are directly related or directly in contact with your brainstem. And so by doing that, they were able to help my brainstem, the nerves in my brainstem, reconnect each other, which, and people who have brain injuries, you will understand this. If this has happened to you, it was like I saw the world from a whole different perspective then. Like I it overwhelmed me, because my senses were coming back. That was 2 years after the injury. So I'd lived 2 years in this fog, not really being able to have a conversation with people, because I couldn't process what they were saying. It was too much for my brain to process. And so when they did this and it reconnected my brainstem, it was like everything was coming back, and it was so overwhelming. I couldn't handle it. It was just it was just
Mhm.
overstimulating for my
Yeah.
brain. That's one of the things that they did. There are several others, but yeah, that's the main one.
Yeah, when they start getting connections working again, it can be extremely overstimulating. Um, last fall, about 6 months after my accident, I started doing different things like red light therapy and transcranial laser, which what you're describing kind of sounds like the transcranial stimulation that they can do,
Hmm.
which can be done either in the mouth or in the nasal passages as well too. I was just reading reading up on this a little bit more this morning, actually. And I had transcranial laser therapy, so they did the laser on the forehead. And when we started doing some of those therapies, we added a lot of things all at once, and I definitely got overstimulated, and it brought a rush of symptoms back the next day, which then we
Yes.
backed off on the therapies, and then I was able to move forward at a much slower pace. But man, it was life changing when you do get into that outside the box thinking.
Right. And it's like you have a whole different life. Like you see things from a whole different perspective. And one of the things that, slamming my face into the hardwood floor did, which I had no idea that this was a thing, but it actually knocked my center of balance off. And so your center of gravity is supposed to be right in the middle, but
Mhm.
mine was behind me and to the left. And so my doctor said, you have like this gangster walk where you kind of hunch over, and which I didn't know that I was doing that. Um, but they put me in this, it's like oh my gosh, it was like one of those carnival rides where you spin around and it goes all over, up and down, around, back and forth, and to recalibrate my center of gravity. And, that was another thing that just blew my mind. Like, how do these people know to do this kind of thing? Like, how
Mhm.
do they even know where my center of gravity is and where it's off and what tests to run? And so wild. I also went through looking into stem cell therapy to help, just repair things.
Yeah.
And that was 6 years after the accident. And that doctor, had been trained in different modalities, was able to tell me that in addition to the rest of my neck injury, that I also had an injury to my dens. And he said to me, which this is an emotional thing, um, he said to me, people with injuries to their dens, only 5% of them survive. The number of those people who are able to walk is even less. You are a walking miracle. And I just was, it was at that point that I realized, okay, like I'm here for a reason,
Mhm.
like I have to share this with people. Like I don't know why I have been through this. I don't know what people can gain from my story, but this has to be told. And so that's when I began sharing my story with other people, and it's just taken on a life of its own since then.
Mhm. As you share with one person and then the next, and you start seeing the head nods when people they've had that experience, and you're describing something similar to what they went through, it helps them to feel not so lonely and not so alone in the process. Because even though we have people around us, and I was just talking to somebody else about this recently, even though we have people around us and we might not be alone per se because we have family, we have a support system, we are alone because that family and support system doesn't always understand what you're going through because they haven't experienced it. And that
Yes.
experience gets you on a whole different level. So part of what you do by sharing your story is helping other people realize that they're not alone and that somebody else has gone through this, and it is possible to make it through the other side even better than you were before.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very powerful. And when I was laying in that bed for almost a year, for 23 hours a day, I, prayed to die. I just started praying that I would die because I was miserable. My family was miserable. And I knew I had enough pain medication to make it happen. And I fully intended to use that. And if you've ever been in that place, a deep, dark place, you know that your thinking is really foggy, that you really don't think clearly. I had been an educator and a social worker. I was the person that people called to come to the rescue when there was suicidal ideation. I was on the other side of that now, and I was thinking things I had never thought before. And I all of a sudden had this moment of clarity. That's the only reason I know how to, the only way I know to explain it is I just had this very clear thought of what if you don't have to die? What if you can take the same energy you're using so hard trying to fight to die and use it instead to fight to live? Maybe if you can get better, you can use your experience to help someone else. And so that's when I began fighting to live with the intention of using my story to help other people. But I
Mhm.
had no idea that it would become what it has become. That, that was, 6 months in. I had 9.5 more years of, going through experiences that now I get to share with others. And it's exactly what you said. It has become such a powerful thing. And it's not. And, I'm working at a TEDx talk right now. And I told my TED coach, I said, this cannot be about notoriety or fame
Mhm.
or anything. This has to be about helping others. And that has to be our mission. And he was like, oh, hallelujah. Like, and so it's because it's that powerful that it's just the purpose is sharing to help other people. And it's like you said, it's that ripple effect that I hear from people all the time who tell me, that my story has impacted them. And it's
Mhm.
so humbling. But everyone has the same power. Like everyone who has been through anything at all, it doesn't have to be a brain injury, but something at all. Someone else out there is going through something similar and can benefit from what you're going through. So yeah, I absolutely agree with what you said about the power of sharing your story.
Yeah. Yep. You described it as a moment of clarity when you finally had that thought. Was there something that triggered it, or did it just kind of come out of nowhere?
It really just came out of nowhere. Like I had this plan. Like I was intending, I said all my goodbyes. I said, discreetly because I didn't want anyone to know this was my plan.
Mhm.
Um, for several reasons. But my daughter was a senior in high school. My son was a freshman in high school, and my little guy was 4 years old. And so I literally completely missed that entire year of their lives, and that's emotional for me too. And so I I didn't want them to have to live that way with me being physically present but emotionally absent.
Mhm.
And so I said my I love yous. I went to sleep for what I thought was the last time, cried myself to sleep, begging, sorry, begging for a way out of this that would not hurt my family. Sorry, I hope you can understand that.
Absolutely.
I went to sleep for the last time, begging for a way out of this that would not hurt my family. And when I woke up, that was the thought that hit me was, what if you don't have to die? And so it was like my prayers were being answered, but in a different way.
Mhm.
It's not the prayer that I had wanted. It was a completely different thought and a whole different line of thinking. And it startled me. It literally shocked me enough to press pause on that plan. And having been a person who has been in a helping role my entire life, just the thought of maybe still being able to help other people just in a different way was really powerful. And it was that motivated me to change my thinking and to really change the whole direction of what was to come from there. So I appreciate you understanding these emotions.
Yeah,
It's very emotional, and it happens. They surface, and I just have to allow them to be what they are. So thank you for understanding.
absolutely. The 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 mindset that you're in when that happens is not a mindset of somebody with a healthy brain. So that's one thing that I had to tell myself because I was in those deep, dark moments as well. And when I couldn't get back to work 3, 4 months after the injury, that's when everything started hitting me. The finances, the feeling even more like a huge burden on my family because of the finances and everything else. And I couldn't do all the things I needed to do. It sends you into a dark place that you don't experience unless you've been through some kind of traumatic event like that. And
Exactly.
even if you've had depression before, it's still not the same kind of thought. It's your brain is injured and it's creating thoughts in your head. So regardless of your ability to think or not think of those things, your brain is creating those thoughts. And that's one big step for anybody who's listening that might have a brain injury. Realize that it's not you that is creating those thoughts because the you that you were before that accident would never think like that.
Yes.
And the you that you're going to be when you recover would never think like that. But right now, in the moment that your brain is injured, you cannot think logically. And that's the only way
That's
that I
so
can explain it.
I love that. I really have never thought about it that way, that it was the injury to my brain that was allowing those thoughts to surface or to mill around in there, because it's so true. I had not ever thought those thoughts before, and it was quite shocking. And so I could see where a lot of your listeners, who are probably going through this, because if you have a brain injury, you obviously, you can't function the way you were before. And that was me. All of my thinking was so negative. I just wanted to be able to do anything I could do before the injury. Anything. I literally could not do anything I could do before. And so I was so focused on, why can't I just do anything I could do before? And I really had to work on switching that mindset to finding something I could do. What can I do now? Instead of focusing on, how do I get back to the person I was before? I will never get back to that person I was before. I was fighting so hard to get her back, but I realized that I had been fighting the wrong battle the whole time. I was fighting to get her back, but what I should have been fighting for is this new person that I was becoming. And I love this new person I am now. I don't ever want to go back to who I was before. But it's taken me 10 years to get there. And so I want to say to your listeners, if you're going through this right now and you think, I'm never going to get better, my life is going to be like this for the rest of my life, it doesn't have to be. And if it just so happens to be that way, it doesn't mean that you have to live in the mindset that you're living in, that you can change that by changing your thoughts. And that made a huge difference for me. Once I was able to change my thoughts, and then I started listening to, I had my husband load up my iPod. It was that long ago I had an iPod.
Yeah.
I put earbuds in my ears and turned it down really low so my brain could handle it. And Tony Robbins, Dr. Wayne Dyer, and Rumi, I started just listening to all of those luminaries. And that's when I came across the wisdom of Rumi, after which my business, Polish the Mirror, is named. And yeah, mindset is a huge, and exactly what you said, like your brain is just not functioning correctly. So it's almost like you have to consciously put forth extra effort to point it in the direction that you want it to go.
Mhm. Your brain can easily come up with the negatives at that point because you're not what you were before the accident. But that whole acceptance piece has been hard for me as well, because I too was fighting because I wanted to get that person back from before the accident. And looking back now, I worked my tail off. I had a full-time job, I had a couple part-time jobs, plus I had my podcast, I had my kids, my family, everything. I literally asked my husband the other day, I said, how did I do everything that I did before the accident? Because
Right?
I don't want to go back to that level of busy. I I have a new sense of purpose. And I think that's what I probably most people get going through an experience like this, but it helps you be accepting of who you're becoming and who you are now, because that's the person that has the experience to share.
That's so powerful. I love that so much. And it takes a mindset shift to see it that
Mhm.
way, because it has taken me, like I said, 10 years to see it from this perspective of, maybe there are people who are interested in what I have to say. Maybe I can help people, just with all of these limitations I still have,
Mhm.
I can still turn them into something that's of value to other people. And so just choosing to see it from that perspective is very powerful.
Yeah. Yep. So tell me a little bit about this polished mirror. How'd you how'd you come up with that? You kind of hinted toward it, but
Yeah, it's a poem by Rumi that goes like this: Ye who seek God apart, that which you seek thou art. If excuse me, if you wish to seek the beloved's face, polish the mirror and gaze into that space. That struck me, and it told me that every answer I seek can be found within. I am looking outside myself for all of these things. I want someone to come rescue me. I want someone to take me back to the person I was. I want someone to make all of this stuff go away. But that's, as I said, that's not the battle that I should have been fighting.
Mhm.
That every answer I seek can be found within. I just have to be willing to become more comfortable with being my authentic self and finding who I am at my core, and be willing to, oh my goodness, accept what's there, Acknowledge it's there, because I can tell you, I do this, I know everybody does this, that we push things down, we pack it down, we fold it nicely and neatly and tuck it down in there so never to surface again.
Mhm.
And that's not the path that will take you to the life you want to live. It's definitely going to require some acknowledging and allowing that stuff to surface, because our emotions serve a purpose. They're part of our communication system. And research shows that when an emotion presents itself to us, it's there to share a message with us, to give us some kind of communication. And it only takes 90 seconds. If we allow that emotion to serve its purpose, it will dissipate in about 90 seconds. If we don't let it serve its purpose and we ignore it and push it down and try to make it go away, or we grab onto it and we hold on to it, then it becomes a hurdle for us to overcome. And so it's such a powerful thing. Polishing the mirror is being able to look at yourself in the mirror, seeing your soul, seeing its purpose, seeing your authentic self, and embracing that and using it to further whatever path you want to be on your in your life. And it's a whole philosophy, it's a whole practice. I have lots of things that's involved in that, but in short, that's pretty much what it is. Polish the mirror.
I love that. It's kind of like wiping off your glasses, wiping a smudge off your glasses so you can see clearly. Same thing with that mirror. You
Exactly.
need to see yourself clearly so that you know who you are and what you're doing.
Yes, exactly. I like to, in the workshops I do, I talk about how there are lenses,
Mhm.
that we have lenses over the mirror, that have layers of gunk on them because we never clean them. And that's exactly what you said. It's like wiping the lenses of your glasses. I love that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Um, when did you start sharing your story?
It's funny because as I after I finished writing my book, I created this. I have documented over the past 10 years. I've documented all that I have gone through, and so I have all of these videos and all these pictures and all this stuff, journal entries. I created a mini documentary that you can access through the book. There's a QR code at the back, and in doing that, I realized that I really started sharing my story after I went to the brain center. I was there for 2 weeks. I learned to re-walk again, and learned a lot. I learned a lot about the brain there at that brain center. And my son's kindergarten teacher was hosting. It's called bal Balavizics or something like that. It's a cross, like you crisscross brain, right and left brain. And so it's activities that teachers are learning to do with students to help them use both sides of the brain. And she asked me if I would come share my experience at the brain center with these people that were gathered. And I was like, oh my gosh, I guess. And so it was 2 years after the accident then that I just, told them a little bit about my experience. And the result of that, people were so impressed. Um, I just began talking to people in conversation, about why do you use a cane, that kind of stuff. And it just kind of would come up naturally in conversation. And one day, like, like I put that intention out there. I want to use my experience to help other people. And I didn't know what that would look like. I didn't know how it would happen. And so these, conversations would come up and I would just, talk about it. Well, one day, one of those conversations ended in someone inviting me to speak on stage in front of 2,000 people to share my story. And so it's like it just has, like I said, taken on a life of its own and just bloomed from there. And that talk was a year ago. And I continue to get messages from people who are inspired by that and who say, I no longer make excuses for my life because of what you have been through. But the thing that jumps out at me is the number of messages I received and still receive from people who live with disabilities. Because my if you have a brain injury, surely this is part of what you experience too. My balance is still not great. Like I do pretty well, but if I'm in a big group of people, I think it's more of a fear that if someone bumps into me, it will knock my balance off and I'm going to fall
Mhm.
or something. So I use a walking device when I'm in with a bunch of people, or if I have to walk very far. And so when I went on stage to share my short story, I had my walking device with me, and so so many people with who live with disabilities messaged me and said, what a, what a beautiful thing it was for me to get up there, but to also represent people who live with disabilities. And there are all kinds of disabilities, not just physical, but the brain injury can be one. Things that happen in the brain can be one as well. And so it was at that point that I realized I'm also representing people who live with disabilities. Like I'm giving them a voice too. And so it just continues to grow. And then the TEDx opportunity just fell in my lap. And it's like, what's next? I don't know what's next. I'm just along for the ride here, but it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. Um, Part of that, having that disability marker is great. And in a way, it's almost a problem with TBI because my balance was definitely a problem. I struggled with it, worked with physical therapy for about 9 months before I was back to about 85% of what I was before. I still have issues with my balance when I'm overwhelmed, when I'm overstimulated,
Yeah.
when I've hit my
Yes.
wall.
Yes.
So definitely still an issue there. But up until that point, I don't have any physical limitations that people can see. So
Yes.
a lot of people pass judgments or they don't understand because they can't see the injury. If you happen to have a physical injury alongside the brain injury, it's almost like people understand it more because they can see it. They can see that you're limited.
Yeah. It's, oh, so many people. I do a lot online. I'm pretty active on the socials.
Mhm.
And so people feel like they know me. And so I have, people who have read my book. It hasn't been out long at the time of this recording, but I have a group of beta readers who know me pretty well.
Mhm.
And literally every one of them said, I never would have thought that you live with what you live with, that you consider a disability,
Yeah.
because you can't see it. It's hidden. It's called a hidden disability. And so many people live with those and are ashamed to let other people know that they're living with this hidden disability. And so I also feel like I'm able to give a voice to that it's okay to live with a hidden disability. It's not something we should be ashamed of. We should be embracing it and using it to help empower other people to share it as well. And so, yeah, it's really, really interesting
Mhm.
that people will see us like you and I look at you and I don't see it.
Yeah.
People look at me and they don't see it, but
Yep.
yet it's there. We know it's there.
Yep. It's it's remarkable. So tell me more about the book. What's it called? What's it? It's sharing your story, but tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's called Finding My Hero Within, a journey from incapacitation to empowerment. And it is my journey of going from being completely incapacitated to now living an empowered life. It's my fighting my way through, I hate to say it, the medical system. And I like to make sure when I say that people ask me all the time, like, did you sue your doctors or do and I'm like, no, no, no. Like, I love my care team. They did what they were trained to do. I don't blame them for anything.
Mhm.
I had to fight my way to find someone who was trained to look for the injury that I had.
Yeah.
And so that's what it's about. It's about the persistence, the roller coaster of finally getting a diagnosis and then realizing, okay, that's not really what I have. That's not really what's causing the problem. Okay, so we go to the next one. We find another diagnosis. Okay, nope, that's not what's really causing the problem.
Mhm.
So not only is it that, it's also, I would consider it a guidebook for people who are dealing with adversity or who want to embrace their authentic selves, because I included three little sections of polish the mirror in there so that I give you just a taste of what I mean when I say polish the mirror and how you can use it in your life. It's practical tips of how you can put that into practice to begin polishing the mirror of your life. And so it's a little bit of both. And people are, calling it, they're telling me that they're going to share it with their loved ones who have chronic illness or who suffer with depression. So I'm hearing the words inspirational, encouraging, things like that, that it's just one of those. Several of them have read it in one day. It's 269 pages long, and that they say they just can't put it down because they want to know what happens next. And so And like I said earlier, at the end, there's a QR code and a link where you can go get my Behind the Story mini documentary, where I documented every day of the Brain Center. When I was at the Brain Center for 2 weeks, I documented what happened that day, what we did, what the doctor said. So there's additional information that's not in the book that's also in that mini documentary if it's something you're interested in learning more about.
Awesome. Where can they find all of these things that you have?
My website's probably the best place. It's kind of a one-stop shop for everything. It's www.getamyshelp.com. It's GETAMYSHELP.com. To order the book is just /book, or there is a link on the homepage that you can go to that will take you to order that book. All of my social links are there. All of the other ways that I help people are there as well. So that's the best way to go to get in touch with me in any way.
Okay. All right. I will include that in the show notes for anybody that's listening, so you don't have to write it down. I will have that there so people can find it easily in the show notes. So much good information. I think we could probably go on all day long, but I think for the sake of both of our brains, we should probably try
Yes.
wrap this up a little bit here. Any last things that you would like to leave us on for the show today?
I always like to tell people that you are more powerful than you think. It's, we make ourselves so small, and we do that sometimes for our own good, or for we don't want to make other people feel bad, or we don't want to make other people, we don't want to feel like a burden to them. So many reasons that we make ourselves small, but that does not benefit us at all. That just know that I say this a lot. I say this in the book, like I'm nothing special. It's not like I have this superpower or this special gift. It's just I've been open and willing to learn as I went along the path. And now I can take what I've learned and help other people, so that you don't have to go through what I've went through, but you can at least learn from it too. But that it doesn't mean that I'm something special. It's everybody has this power to do this. You just have to be willing to open yourself up to acknowledging it and accessing that. So yeah, you're powerful. You're very, very powerful.
Mm-hmm. A great way to end the show today. Thank you so much for being here, Amy.
Thank you, Mandy. It's been such a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to subscribe, like, and share this with others to help me continue on with my mission to help people live healthier, happier lives. Go to www.brainwellnesssolutions.com to see what I'm up to and get links to all the social medias there. See you next time.